Alright, let's assume you just bought Sea of Thieves, finished the Maiden Voyage aka tutorial, and gotten to the point where the game no longer shows you tooltips on how to play. What should you do? Well, thankfully for you, it is no longer day one of release, and there are actually a lot of things you could be doing. From going on story adventures called Tall Tales to battling other ships on the open sea, the world is open for you to explore and do as you please. But all that choice can also be very intimidating. What do these different clouds in the sky mean? What's a good way to make some money early on? And how do I handle the different enemy types? Worry not, my friend, for I am here to show you how I believe you should be spending your first day in this game. I'll be taking you by the hand to show you how to earn your first fortune and also talk about what you should probably avoid on your first go around. So, our journey begins, as most of them do, waking up at an outpost. Now, not all outposts are made equal, and the community definitely prefers some over others. This right here is Daggertooth Outpost, and its gloomy vibe immediately tells you that you're probably too far east for your first day on the seas. The most eastern part of the map is called the Devil's Roar, which has a bunch of unpleasant stuff going on like volcanoes and more volcanoes. Listen, most people don't want to spend more time there than necessary, even if they have like 1,000 hours in this game. So we leave that lobby to try our luck on a new server, preferably with a spawn closer to the western part of the map where the weather is much more inviting. The first thing you're gonna want to do is stock up your ship and supplies. The easy way to do that would be by going to the Merchant Alliance, browsing their resources and commodities to then purchase supply crates as well as a storage crate. The storage crate makes collecting supplies from the barrels around the outpost a lot easier because you can just hold down one button while carrying it to slope up what's inside. Unfortunately, this is your first day in the game, so you can't afford any of that. So just go around the outpost and stuff your pockets with as many supplies as you can carry before heading out to the open sea. I recommend not spending too much time stocking up because, trust me, sinking as well as losing your stuff is part of the game, and since you're still inexperienced, chances are that's gonna happen sooner rather than later. Alright, so it's time to find some content, and you spotted some weird looking clouds off in the distance. Those, my friends, are world events. Randomly spawn PvE content promising great rewards for an equivalent challenge. There is actually only one very specific world event that I would recommend you try as a new player, and we'll get to that later, but for now you should be avoiding these and instead set your sights for something else. So you see all these NPCs chilling at every outpost waiting to hand over some quests so you can begin grinding out reputation for even better quests later on? Yeah, forget about those. Reputation level 1 voyages are not really worth your time, and there's a better way to learn all the mechanics within these voyages while also making more money. Introducing island hopping. With our stocked up vessel, we now set course for the closest small island we can find. In our case, our destination would be Barnacle Cay. I know it is tempting to drop the anchor in order to stop the ship, but instead raise the sails to slow down your vessel. You should avoid leaving your ship anchored because it is possible that you'll get attacked by other pirates at any time, in which case you want to be able to set sail as soon as possible instead of having to raise the anchor. By holding down the block button with your sword and then clicking attack, you can charge up a sword lunge, which dashes you further towards your destination than a regular jump. And we're in luck. There is a skeleton captain currently roaming the island. Whatever you do or don't find on these islands is always random, but skeleton captains definitely rate among my favorites. Not only are these easy to take out, but they often leave behind not only loot, but also something called skeleton orders. These are basically just like any old voyage you can buy from an NPC, except there's a greater chance of finding valuable items, especially if your reputation is still very low. Upon opening our quest radial, we can see that the skeleton orders this captain dropped consist of a treasure map for the very island we are currently on. Perfect. Finding the right spot to dig can feel a bit tricky at first, but since we decided to come to a small island, it is easier to learn here than on one of the massive ones. Simply try to look for identifiable landmarks and sooner or later you'll find the treasure. Mine right here was doubly dangerous, a stronghold gunpowder keg defended by more skeletons. I had to make sure I don't accidentally slash into it because that is going to detonate the darn thing. When it comes to gunpowder kegs of all types, there's really only one place where you should store them: on another player's ship. Do not ever take these things along because if they explode for whatever reason, your ship is going to take massive damage and probably sink within a minute. The second treasure marked on the map ended up being a captain's chest. Decent money for sure. All I had to do was take out the surrounding skeletons again. Once that was done, I spotted a mermaid statue holding more valuable treasure, but getting close to it damages me over time. Mermaid gems are great because you can hand them into any of the companies to gain reputation and gold, with the exception of the endgame faction Athena's Fortune. But you need enough damage to get them out of the statue, which our stronghold gunpowder keg was absolutely perfect for.
What statue? You!
Now I can show the revive function, isn't that great? Playing pranks on your friends with these is definitely part of the fun, so long that your ship does not take any damage in the process. The more time you spend on an island, the more likely it is that more enemies will show up to give you a hard time. They rarely drop anything of value, so it's definitely worth just getting to the next island instead of waiting here. We scooped up all the items we could find and discovered a treasure chest among them. This is gonna help us carry the small trinkets, which otherwise we would need to deliver one by one. To save time, you can always leave the treasure at a convenient location for you to use your ship's harpoon on them. That takes far less time than carrying them on board by hand. But not all treasure is worth taking. Specific Merchant Alliance cargo that requires you to bring it to specific locations within a time limit are not something you should concern yourself with. So just pick up things you can sell at any outpost. We continued onto the next nearest small island to repeat the process, where I caught Birdie off guard once again and even found a couple more pieces of treasure, though unfortunately not as much as the previous one. The third island though was where the big money was at. We found a message in a bottle, which is a quest we'll take a look at later, but there was also a skeleton captain for us to defeat who once again gave us a treasure map for this very island, and what we found definitely surprised us a little. Here we go. Oh my god. This is actually so valuable, what the heck?
I'm mad on skeleton orders, dude.
Skeleton orders are OP. Yep, we found cursed treasure chests. Specifically the chest of rage on the first dig and the chest of 1,000 grogs on the second one. Cursed treasure always has some quirky downsides to it that you gotta be aware of. The grog chest will make you drunk for as long as you are holding it, and the chest of rage will periodically explode and set everything around it ablaze unless you can submerge it in or splash it with water. With us having collected a decent haul, we decided to go and sell our stuff at Plunder Outpost. By putting the chest of rage at the very tip of our boat, it would only set ablaze a tiny part of our ship whenever it raged, which made it very easy to deal with. There is a way to make sure it never damages your ship by filling it with water to a certain degree and placing it in a specific location, but the outpost was not too far away, so I didn't care to set that up. What I did care about was that brigantine which decided to come towards us. It's best to always assume ill intent from any ship approaching you. You don't want to be caught with your pants down, so even if they didn't want to fight, it's good to be prepared for if they are. This ship in particular was making its intention known. Running their vessel on half sails is a clear indication for combat, since fighting full sail means you'd be zooming past your enemies with barely any chance to take a shot. And them firing the first shot just confirmed our suspicion. The first course of action was for us to immobilize their ship. Aiming my chain shots at their mast would make sure to take them down immediately if I hit, and lucky me, I was having a good day on cannons. But we were still in a bad spot. Brigantines have much more firepower than sloops, so I had to aim at their cannon range to make sure they can't fire at us while we try to get out of their broadside. The hit markers confirmed that I hit somebody on that crew. Between them trying to heal their HP as well as repairing their mast, I made sure to give them enough busy work so that they couldn't board us. But when they took out our mast as well, we were suddenly left sitting in range, which immediately showed us why we never want to be in the enemy's broadside, especially if they outgun us.
They hit our sail
I
again.
got absolutely rolled. Oh my god. Don't die for it.
Okay, go. Trying to get us moving again.
Yep.
Trying to get out of the broadside. I'm gonna go to the front of them real quick. Second break coming.
A second? Oh god.
Second brig is running Dark Adventure sails.
You're joking.
I'm not joking.
With a second brigantine joining the fray, our priorities began to shift. I swam on over to the outpost to get our most valuable loot sold before we were taken out, and surprisingly enough, I got away with it. I even found some leftover treasure on the dock, which I then went to sell too. Just that the owner of said treasure then showed up, and it is now that I'm gonna have to get real with you. It would be disingenuous of me to pretend that Sea of Thieves always works flawlessly. Combat is probably its weakest point, with many bugs occurring on a fairly regular basis, from shots not dealing damage despite you getting a hit marker, or buckets splashing back water into your hull even though you just emptied it. A lot of hit detection type stuff just does not really work consistently in this game. So as you watch me helplessly flailing about trying to take care of this guy, you can witness me trying to use my pistol just for it to refuse to fire, as well as my slashes getting interrupted by his attacks despite me connecting my attack first. I'm not saying I'm a great PvPer, but I can tell bullshit when I smell it, and if you decide to sink some serious hours into Sea of Thieves, you're gonna have to get used to this. Depending on what you die to, you can pick up differently colored flames at the Ferry of the Damned. That is useful for some PvE content, none of which matters to us as beginners, but either way, you can pick them up and decorate your ship with it if you like. On the note of which, a lot of people are going to tell you to keep the lights on your ship off to stay stealthy in a way, but realistically, any halfway decent player will see you anyway, so I don't tend to bother with that. Thankfully, the second brigantine scared away the first one, and now both of them were gone, leaving us to sell our loot in peace, which we decided to do now before starting a world event, just to make sure we can cash in before somebody actually sinks us. We made sure to put all of our loot at the front of our ship because it makes unloading it a lot faster. Don't forget to keep the treasure chest around until you have sold all the trinkets, and after our first run of selling, we'd already made 18,038 gold pieces. That's almost enough to buy an emissary flag license in just about an hour. But we still had that quest from the message in a bottle sending us to Cutlass K to take care of a skelly. While scouting the map, we spotted something that's important for you to know as new players. What you see right here is a ship flying the flag of the Reaper's Bones. A Reaper emissary is visible to anyone on the map, but once they hit rank 5 on their emissary flag, they can spot every other emissary on the map themselves. Naturally, none of that matters to us right now because we cannot afford an emissary flag, though that does not mean that we were safe, because emissary or not, Reapers will often look to fight anyone they can spot. A basic rule of thumb is to take a look around the horizon every 5 minutes while doing quests on an island. You never want the sound of cannon shots to be the thing that alerts you of somebody else's presence, so keeping a watchful eye out is definitely necessary. The skelly that we were sent to hunt down required us to defeat several waves of minions first, which gives me an opportunity to talk about enemy types. These shadowy skeletons can only be attacked while exposed to light. That is no issue during the day, but if it was nighttime, I would have to shine my lantern on them, which makes them attackable for a few seconds. Golden skeletons can't be hurt by swords and are resistant to bullets unless they get wet, though a gunpowder keg is often enough to dispose of them. Most other enemy types I can think of just die when attacked, and speaking of getting attacked, you can see that Reaper emissary ship had gotten krakened in the background while we were doing our quest. But even better than that...
Hey, Cliff.
What's good?
They've sunk.
What? Yeah, okay, maybe we should run into that Kraken so we can show the new guys how not to sink on your first encounter with it. So once we had defeated the skelly we came here for, just to realize that doing all that work for a single skull was not worth it, we headed out to enter the Kraken's reach so that our lesson could begin. First things first, the Kraken, and Megalodon for that matter, scale according to the size of your crew. A Brigantine Kraken will always deal more damage than a Sloop Kraken, and if you get Krakened while on a galleon, you better make sure that everybody knows their roles, because not repairing the damage in time means certain defeat. But because this one right here had spawned on another sloop, every single tentacle arm only takes a couple of shots to take out, and if it slaps you around, the damage usually is not that much of a big deal. When fighting the Kraken, the only arms you have to worry about are the ones immediately next to your ship. All the ones further off in the distance literally do not matter, so don't waste time and cannonballs trying to take them out. Every arm you defeat should leave behind a couple pieces of loot, and depending on the size of your ship, you're gonna have to take care of more or fewer total arms to end the encounter. So if you focus your attention on just taking out the arms that are immediately next to your sloop, you can literally end this encounter in under 2 minutes, even if you are a new player. Now, once we had sold the items we got off the Kraken, we can finally turn to our final challenge for our first day. A world event. It is my belief that this fire tornado, also called the Ashen Winds event, is the perfect piece of content for you to target. So why are world events dangerous for new players? Firstly, since this is not a personal voyage, any other crew on the server can see this event and might want to take it on themselves, which could lead to PvP. Secondly, since new players don't know which mechanics they'll be facing off against in this fight, it usually takes them a lot longer to complete it, and that gives other players more time to spot your vessel and attack you while you're trying to do it. Ashen Winds is a great event to start off with, especially if you play solo, because the boss is very predictable, the minions are very weak, and the loot is actually still worth your while if you are new. Once you have done it a few times, you don't even have to bring your ship around anymore. You can roll up on a rowboat and nobody's gonna know that you're there. But if you do bring your ship, try to hide it out of sight as best as you can, and make sure to leave it somewhere away from the boss. There is one mechanic that can damage your ship if it is nearby, so you'll want to make sure it is out of harm's way. Whatever weapon loadout you were using, I recommend switching to a sword and blunderbuss for this one. The sword dash I showed you earlier can easily one-shot the minions, and since the boss is so predictable, you can usually get close to deal big blunderbuss damage. The first ability you will have to deal with is the boss tossing flaming rocks at you. Those will also target the ground you stand on, so as long as you keep moving, you should be able to dodge. The second one is then periodically summoning minions, which, as I have said already, you can just sword dash into submission. Number 3 is a smoke screen, which you can just run out of and wait for it to dissipate. The boss also randomly jumps at you, but unless you are literally standing still, it's probably not gonna hit you. So keep fighting it around the ammo box so you can continue using your blunderbuss. Number 4 is a fire breath ability, which, like, just don't stand in front of them. Blunderbuss it into the back, but don't touch it because it will set you ablaze. Number 5 is a bit more tricky. The boss will say something like, "I'll blow you away," in which case you don't want to be standing next to them because they definitely make good on that threat. There is literally only a single ability you really have to be careful of, which is them summoning flaming boulders from the sky that can and will one-shot you if you don't go looking for cover. This ability is also why we don't want to have our ship anywhere near this thing. With a bit of practice, you can beat this whole encounter in as little as 10 minutes, and the fun part is when you get to collect the loot. This event can take place on a variety of different islands, so if there's elevated ground, make sure you go check it because some of the treasure can also spawn up there. Alright, so you've defeated the boss, collected the loot, and finally get to cash in your last run. The Ashen Wind Skull itself is worth a pretty penny. A fresh one is gonna give you 10,000 gold pieces in one fell swoop, and together with the rest of the loot left behind by the boss, along with the other loot we had sold on our previous runs already, how much did we make on our first day? A very respectable 69,124 gold. Obviously, however much you make depends on your RNG, such as the nature of island hopping, but all in all, we have discovered several islands, learned how to dig up treasure, fought different types of enemies, engaged in PvP, and even successfully completed a world event. Now all that is left is for you to embark on your own adventure to begin carving your legacy in this pirate world. If you want to see some of my shenanigans, then what about you check out my last video in which we decided to play Robin Hood and stole some loot from a toxic galleon to give it to other players. You can find the code on screen right now. But until then, thank you everybody so much for watching. Don't forget to drop me a like on your way out if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you want to see more, and definitely ring that bell icon to not miss out on my next upload. I hope you guys have a day filled with riches on the sea, and until next time, peace!